There are several things that are specific to these buildings. One specific thing is this synergy between the sources and the radiant ceiling. The pairing of the two makes a winning case for ARC. Another thing I would touch upon is the technologies that we use for the air handling units. So the air handling units are the equipment that deal with the fresh air, the outside air. That's their sole purpose. We take the outside air, a certain amount, which is quite high. Being high also means we need to be quite energy efficient. These air handling units have certain stages through which the fresh air passes. In a random way, I would mention the filtering. So we already identified that we have something that not many office buildings, in my knowledge, no office building has. So the active carbon filters with the purpose of diluting the VOCs from the outside air. Then we have a very complex, interesting heat recovery system. It's a double wheel rotary system. It means we have two devices which are meant to recover energy and humidity. What needs to be understood is that during summertime, we need to consume quite a high amount of energy to cool down the air because we cannot deliver it inside the space how it is outside, 35, sometimes even 40 degrees Celsius. So we need to cool it down. So that's one way we identify consumption of energy. So we need to cool this air down to tolerable temperature. The second thing that generates energy consumption is the fact that air, especially during the summertime, has a certain amount of humidity inside it, which is not pleasant to the body. You need a certain maximum amount of humidity inside the air. So that means we need to dry it. So that process of drying the air is quite high energy consumer. So what we are doing with this heat recovery wheel, we basically do the following. We don't invest energy in drying the air. We just move a certain amount of humidity from the outside air, and because this is a rotating device, we dry a part of the wheel, and then when the wheel comes to the outside fresh air, it basically helps to absorb some moisture from quite a lot of moisture from the outside. So that means the cooling machines will not have to deal with that quantity of humidity, because this is just basically thrown outside. So that's a very specific, very technical aspect of the air handling unit, which makes it highly, highly efficient, energy efficient. And then there's, of course, the cooling and heating energy transfer between the exhaust air from the inside, because during the summertime, we need to keep the temperature of the microclimate around 24 degrees Celsius. So we have this air of 24 degrees Celsius, which we don't want to directly throw outside. We need to recover all that cooling energy. So we recover it and we cool down the outside air, which is, as an average during summertime, around 35 degrees Celsius. So we cool it down. That again means we don't need to oversize the cooling machines, the chillers. Thus, we don't have to oversize the consumption of electrical energy. So we're quite efficient. We only cool down what we cannot recover, and we only heat up what we, again, cannot recover from the inside. If we look at the main consumers in the building, we have the microclimate, which needs to be maintained. So that's roughly 50% as an average of the consumers in an office building. And then there's this other half, which is the fresh air. Take it with a bit of salt, just to have some numbers that we are discussing. With this double wheel system, what we are basically doing, we are shifting this balance. So we reduce the amount of energy that we consume to treat the fresh air. So we bring all this balance somewhere around 70-30%. So by reducing the energy we need to treat the fresh air, we basically have only 70%, 60 to 70% of the sources delivering energy for maintaining the microclimate, and only 30-40% for the fresh air. Then, of course, inside the air handling unit, we have the other basic things that technology like that usually has: heat exchangers for heating and cooling, steam injectors, and other devices, efficient fans with motors that are continuously controlled. They are not fixed on a certain speed. So all these things, when you look at them, they add up, and you bring the overall efficiency of the system to a very high level. If we look at other things that are specific to this office building, for example, something that it's not quite common, it's been done, but not for many office buildings, we recover the gray water. So that means we have individual systems that are connected to the gray water systems in the building. Basically, these are the lavatories. So we connect them individually. We do not mix them with other types of system that we usually connect to the sewage system. And then we collect all this gray water, we filter it, because we need to dispose of oils and other components, and then we reuse it. And we inject it in toilets, for example, or urinals. So that's water that is basically recirculated. We don't need to take it from the system. It's something that elevates the overall consumption of the building. And then we have something that's a little bit more mainstream in the office building market. We recover the rainwater, we retain it, or most of this volume, we retain it, and we use it for maintaining certain spaces, for example, that needs to be washed, or green areas that need to be washed. All this water is reused, is not thrown in the system, in the city's system. So that's another thing quite interesting for an office building. And then there is another thing I would like to discuss about. It's the BMS, how we call it. It's the building management system, which is a way of making sure that everything we discussed here actually happens. Because if you have a very well-tuned car, but then you lack the controls, then okay, it's something that won't work with the efficiency you had in mind. So because of that, we have automation systems that are doing two things. One thing, they are monitoring all the types of qualities that we look inside the air: temperature, humidity, pollutants in some cases, CO2 content. We measure all those things, and then we take decisions based on what we measure. So we don't need to throw fresh air in a space where people are not populating the space. Or we don't need to cool very aggressively a space that, again, has just a 2-3 person. We can elevate the temperature, the energy actually, that we're delivering to the space. So for all this fine tuning, we need this performance system, which we have it. Another thing that the BMS brings, I'm taking a step back. I was talking about two things. So one thing is an active way of controlling things inside the building. And there's the second thing that the BMS is doing, is basically doing monitoring. Because we have all these fancy, sophisticated, complex systems, we need to constantly look at certain parameters to make sure that they are performing as we would like them to perform. So this is, let's say, a second stage or a second part that makes the BMS system, is the monitoring. And when you combine the two, from the combination of these two things, there is a third thing that can arise and already started happening. It's not something very commercial, but it's something that helps you to be future-proof. So that means collecting data, you can at one point use certain machine learning algorithms, and ARC would be able to reach a point where you can implement the idea of predictive maintenance. So what does that mean? We don't need to wait for a certain system to break down, because this is usually what happens in the area of maintenance. A system fails to perform, and then a certain set of action starts to happen. You decommission the system, you buy new spare parts, and you change it. With predictive maintenance, you are able to, by learning the ways of the systems, you can predict when something is going to be close to its end of life or close to a situation where it will fail. So that means you can be prepared when that happens. What does that mean? You don't lose time. You don't put people in a certain part of building to wait for a long period of time until you solve the problem. So you're doing things the smart way. This is what monitoring a lot of the parameters and controlling others can help gain data for machine learning algorithms that eventually can take you to a stage where you can do predictive maintenance. Most of it comes from this because they are the sources, and they are also they are the heaviest consumers in terms of electricity. They are the biggest machines usually the biggest machines in an office buildings. So by implementing all these little things I was talking about, the air handling units with a certain type of heat recovery systems and other efficient things inside it, coupled with radiant ceilings. All these machines, you help them perform at one of the very high range of their span. So I think I mentioned some numbers for the heat pumps. We can reach the COP, which is an important number in our field, the coefficient of performance, which can be 4 or even 4.5. So that's very high. That means for each kilowatt of electricity that you inject, you produce with the source 4.5 kilowatts of heating. When you look at the cooling machines, that's even higher. You can go all the way up to 6.5. Maybe in some cases, I would say 7. All these things help the building reach all the requirements for the NZEB numbers that you need to touch. More than that, we need to be 10% lower from these numbers. So yes, all these sources help, but we need to look at all these things in their ensemble. So it's not just the machines, it's also the building. It's the quality and the efficiency of the thermal envelope. It's the quality of the glazing and all its solar filters. All these things add up, because you can have all these types of systems that are highly efficient, but then you have a building that is basically losing a lot of energy. So, okay, you solve a problem, but not the entire problem. So again, it's a way of looking at things, which is like a synergy. You have the performance of the building, which you need to couple with the performance of the sources. The sources deliver energy to a system that maintain the microclimate, in our case, the radiant ceiling. So all these things coupled, we are managing to reach this point where we have a very highly efficient building in its entirety. From our experience with radiant ceilings, because we are not fixed in this paradigm with the conventional systems like the fan coil units, there is a lot of efficiency in terms of how the space can be arranged. What we saw in most of the buildings, there is a type of solution that is being constantly used in the office buildings. That is the case where you have this type of air devices that are put in front of the facade, which blows during summertime very cold air, and during wintertime hot air. So what we saw many times in these types of office building is the fact that roughly half a meter from the facade is lost space. So the tenant rents that space, but in fact he cannot use it, because if you place a working desk over there, people will start doing things, duct taping the air devices, or just staying a lot less on the working desk. Basically, that space, in my opinion, is lost. Something that does not happen with thermally active ceilings. Whatever the approach of the designer is, islands, a fully fitted active ceiling, it doesn't matter. You take advantage of the entire space that you are renting. So this is something that it's quite subtle, and it's something interesting that we discovered throughout the life span of the buildings that we design with this type of system. That's one of its highlights, because the system as we thought of it, it's highly modular. So it means many things. One thing is that if you go, let's say, you can think as maybe a worst case scenario, depending on the way you're looking at it. So if you have the entire space covered with a metal ceiling, this is designed in such a way that if you want in the future, you as a tenant, you want to implement a new partition, you want to make a new space, then you have the means to do that without interfering too much with the entire system. So you just place partition walls and you do some adjustments in the BMS, and that's it. So it's highly, let's say, it's very friendly with works that you need to do in a space when you are fitting it out. If you're doing a very specific fit out, which is very particular to that space, okay, let's say it's less flexible, but the system, as the main parts of the system as we designed them, again, it permits you as a developer, and the tenant has the possibility to interfere minimally with the existing systems. So you don't need to tear anything down, or you don't need to have very aggressive interventions in the space overall, either systems, either certain materials. So from that aspect, it's quite friendly. And I would say there's another advantage: it's quite fast, because I saw it many times. You have this enthusiastic tenant that shakes your hand and says, yes, we enter in a contractual period. I want to rent the space, but I want to move. And they usually want to move quite fast. So if you have all the systems that you usually in the traditional office buildings, a lot of those systems you need to take down. You have all these fan coil units. Some of them you need to relocate. Some of them needs to be supplemented. Some of them needs to be cancelled. All these things take time. Ceilings that do not perfectly fit with the design. All those things take you to 2-3 months of fit out for a space, which is okay, quite a lot. Maybe it's not the problem the first time, but then when you do modifications, refits, and all these things, we are quicker, because you just need to plug we have these main distributions that we thought about them. We designed them to be modular. You don't need to cut pipes, add pipes, ducts, things like that. You have it there, you just need to connect them. So the interventions and the process is quite minimal in terms of force that's involved in doing the fit out. Internal air quality, that's for sure one thing. We don't recirculate air, we don't have noise, and we have a very constant temperature field. So it doesn't matter where you are in the space, you'll feel the same. So these are the main benefits if I were to make a summary. If we're looking at the costs attached, of course, if you and we have this way to measure all the energy consumption. I can give you an example for one of the tenants that we fitted out in the past. They went from a traditional building and they they relocated in a building that was benefiting of this type of approach with radiant ceilings. And after 1 year of operating, we were discussing about the costs, and they were saying their costs related to energy consumption were the same as the old building they relocated from, taking into account they rented 40% more space. So it's quite efficient. I imagine that you have a traditional system where something breaks down. You need to announce the tenant. You need to schedule the intervention. People in that area cannot work for a particular amount of time, even day sometimes. You need to take down things. You need to go inside the space, the technical space, remedy all these things. The radiant ceiling is a very unmaintainable device. By unmaintainable meaning it doesn't need, you just need to dedust the types of particles that electrostatically attach to the ceiling, and that's it. That's the only intervention that you need to do. Otherwise, we have very special areas that we dedicated for the technical parts where people from maintenance come and intervene, but we design them in such a way not to interfere with the everyday activities of the tenant. Okay, every time something very, very catastrophic can happen, it's a possibility, but we limited that to a bare minimum. That would be a very specific requirement from them during the fit out. So there are several types of approaches that a tenant can implement. We had tenants that they wanted temperature control in each space. That's okay, we can do it. You have 10 rooms, you can have 10 different temperature settings. Then we had more corporate tenants that wanted to even further control the energy consumption. So they did not allow this type of flexibility. So they said, no, we want a uniform temperature. We will set it. It's going to be 25 during summertime, and that's it. We don't want people setting it to 30 degrees or 18 degrees. So we want to be able to control this. All these types of approaches can be implemented with this sophisticated building management system that ARC is equipped with. Hybrid ones, meaning you have certain areas that are individually controlled, and then you have big areas that have a very specific set point, temperature set point. Summer, winter. We can have offsets. That's another thing that we usually implement, and it's more nuanced, if you like. So we have a set point that it's not visible to the tenant. It's set it in the BMS. Let's say you have a base 25 degrees for the summertime, but then you have areas where the client can set an offset. So he can say, I don't know what the temperature is, but I feel a little bit hot. So I want to take it down a bit. So he says -2 degrees Celsius, but he doesn't know out of what, out of 25, out of 23. All these types of ways to approach the control in the space are available for the tenants. And the best part of it is mostly programming and less interventions in the system. So it's also very friendly with the works that needs to be done during the fit out and afterwards. This is why there are certain countries in Europe, like Belgium, for example, that use this system by default. The status quo of the office buildings. If you go to the European Union offices, 99% of them will be handled with active ceilings, radiant ceilings. I think Holland and all the surrounding countries, more than 90% of the office buildings are done this way. And then there are also countries that are starting to adopt it more and more, like Spain, France, England. So, yeah, they reached the same conclusion as you did. This was the starting point for our design. It was a standard that we wanted to implement from day one, even though it was quite in the beginning of this all NZEB approach, especially for the office building. So our target was to have an office building with no connection to the gas system, which is highly unheard of. I mean, up until today, I don't think there are office buildings of this size that are not connected to the main distribution of natural gas. There will be for sure in the future, but ARC is going to be one of the first buildings. Because of that, the heat pumps are at the core of this approach. It means everything that was done in the past with boilers, these devices that are connected to the gas, that they were producing hot water for the systems in the office, we took them out and we replaced them with heat pumps. Our decision was to use two types of thermal dynamic machines. Heat pumps, on one hand, they are handling the part of heating, so mainly some parts of spring, some parts of autumn, and the full winter. And they are what we call air-water type of heat pumps. And then we have the chillers, the cooling machines, which are a completely separate set of equipments that are paired with cooling towers, as you explained, for the very highest efficiency, which they are used only to produce chilled water. So they are handling the cooling part of the building during, again, some parts of summer, some parts of spring, some parts of autumn, and the entire summer. These two approaches, besides the fact that they handle the entire energy part of the building, thermal energy part of the building, they also give this possibility to ARC to be independent of the gas distribution systems because of a lot of aspects. Okay, one is the uncertainty of pricing. We don't know how this will evolve in the future. Then there's an ecological part. When you burn gas, you have a certain amount of CO2 that you give to the outside environment. And we already, I mean, everybody already knows that this is not what we want. This gradually contributes to the entire global warming of the planet. These systems are at the core of ARC building. As you explained, they have a completely different involvement than the conventional buildings, because of course if we take out the boilers which were connected to gas, then they have to take over. So yeah, ARC is going to be one of the first offices, one of its kinds that will be independent of the gas distribution system. When you burn 1 cubic meter of gas, then okay, there's a certain amount of energy that you extract from it. Then when you look at this complex thermodynamical cycle, like in a heat pump, you look at it from a different perspective. I mean, you invest one kilowatt of electrical energy that can come, for example, for burning a certain amount of gas, but then you produce 4 times more cooling or heating energy, because this is how the cycle works. So of course, it's purely in terms of energy, it's much more efficient. We have, of course, we have the backup systems. Okay, the backup systems are designed to handle parts of the year when the electricity could be interrupted. So we have a backup system that handles this. But more than that, we have the photovoltaic system that contributes with basically free energy from the sun, and it's directly injected into the office grid, distribution grid. You could say that there are 2 types of backups. If one drops, then we have the second one.